I never thought I'd be the one to destroy my own family, but looking back at what happened 15 years ago, that's exactly what I did. The worst part is that I knew exactly what I was doing. I just didn't care enough to stop myself. Now, at 38, I'm finally dealing with the consequences of my actions, and it's harder than I ever imagined. I had just finished college and moved back to my hometown while looking for work. The job market wasn't great, but I managed to land a decent position at a local firm within a few months. My younger brother was away at university in another state, studying engineering at a school about 6 hours from home. His girlfriend stayed behind to study at the local community college, mainly because her family couldn't afford to send her out of state. At first, it seemed innocent enough. Since we were both in town, we'd run into each other at coffee shops or the grocery store. Sometimes we'd grab lunch or catch a movie. My stepmom would invite her over for family dinners since she'd been dating my brother all through high school. Everyone treated her like she was already part of the family. She got along great with my stepmom's kids, especially her daughter who was around the same age. My stepmom kept making comments about how well we got along, how I had a stable job now while my brother was still studying. She would point out how mature I was, how I was ready to settle down, while my brother still had years of school ahead of him. Looking back, I think she was trying to play matchmaker, even though she knew my brother and his girlfriend were planning to get married after graduation. My dad noticed what was happening and wasn't happy about it. He tried to put a stop to things, telling me directly to back off and respect my brother's relationship. He even banned her from family dinners for a while, but my stepmom would still invite her when he wasn't around. I should have listened to my dad, but instead, I let myself get pulled deeper into the situation. My brother would visit during breaks and holidays. They acted like a normal couple when he was around, holding hands, making plans for their future, talking about where they'd live after he graduated. But when he left, she'd spend more and more time with me. We started texting constantly, making excuses to see each other. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was betraying my brother. But I convinced myself that if she was willing to be with me, then maybe they weren't meant to be together anyway. One of my other brothers, I'll call him Mike, figured out what was going on. He tried to warn my brother during one of his visits home. Mike and I had never gotten along great, but this made things even worse between us. I was angry at him at the time, called him a traitor to my face, but now I understand he was just trying to protect our brother from getting hurt even worse later on. Things came to a head one weekend when my brother came home unexpectedly. He walked in on us sitting too close on the couch, saw the way we jumped apart when he entered the room. That's when everything started falling apart. He confronted her first, then me, then our parents about keeping quiet about what they'd seen happening. He was furious with my stepmom for encouraging it, and with our dad for not doing more to stop it. The next few months were chaos. My brother dropped out of school and disappeared. His girlfriend, who soon became my girlfriend, moved in with me after her parents kicked her out. My stepmom defended our relationship while my dad barely spoke to me. Mike took our brother's side completely and started distancing himself from the family too. Within a couple of months after my brother found out, my girlfriend told me she was pregnant. I proposed right away, thinking this would somehow make everything better, make it all okay. Both our families pushed for a quick wedding, saying it was the right thing to do for the baby. My parents even helped pay for it, though I could tell my dad's heart wasn't in it. Mike refused to come to the wedding, and my other brother was completely gone by then. We found out later he'd moved to another town without telling anyone. The wedding was small and tense. Half the family didn't show up, and the other half seemed uncomfortable being there. My new wife's family was polite but cold. They'd always liked my brother and had trouble accepting how things had changed. Even during what should have been a happy celebration, there was this undercurrent of wrongness that we couldn't shake. I tried reaching out to my brother a few times after the wedding, but his number was disconnected. Mike wouldn't tell me where he was, just kept warning me about how badly I'd hurt him. One of our aunts finally told us they were both safe, and we needed to move on with our lives. So that's what we tried to do. We bought a small house with help from our parents, and I focused on building my career. My wife finished her degree online while pregnant. When our son was born, it felt like maybe things would get better. My parents doted on their first grandchild, and my stepmom's family fully embraced my wife. A few years later, we had another child. For a while, things seemed okay on the surface. We had family dinners, celebrated holidays, took vacations, but there was always this heaviness hanging over everything. This knowledge that our happiness came at the cost of destroying my brother's life and splitting our family apart. Every milestone with our kids reminded me that my brother wasn't there to be their uncle, that Mike had never even met them. I pushed these thoughts away for years, telling myself it was all in the past. I focused on being a good father and husband, on providing for my family. But the guilt never really went away. It just stayed buried until something would trigger it, like seeing old family photos or hearing my mom talk about how much she missed her other sons. Then my mom started going to therapy and decided to try finding my brothers. She managed to track them down on social media and discovered they were both married with children of their own. Mike had married his longtime girlfriend, and my brother had built a new life with someone else. They both had bigger families than mine, 3 kids each, while we only had 2. That's when everything I'd been suppressing for years started coming to the surface. The weight of what I'd done, the true cost of my choices, it all became impossible to ignore. Now I'm finally facing it all, but I don't know how to make it right. How do you apologize for something that, despite all the pain it caused, gave you the most precious things in your life? My mom started rebuilding her relationship with my brother about a year ago. She takes my younger siblings to spend holidays with his family now. I've seen pictures of his wife and kids on social media. He has twin girls and a boy. They look happy in the photos, always smiling and doing things together as a family. His wife is pretty, with long dark hair and a kind smile. She looks nothing like my wife, which somehow makes me feel both better and worse. When I showed the photos to my dad, he couldn't handle it. He sat at the kitchen table for hours, just staring at pictures of grandchildren he'd never met. I heard him on the phone with my mom later that night, talking for hours about everything they'd missed. The next morning, his eyes were red, and he could barely look at me. These days, my whole life feels like it's made of broken pieces that don't fit together anymore. My mom treats me differently now. She's polite but distant, like I'm a stranger she has to be nice to. She used to spend lots of time with my kids, but now her visits are shorter and less frequent. Last month, she told me something that's been eating at me ever since. She said she regrets supporting my marriage and helping with the wedding. She wishes she'd taken a stronger stand against what I did, like Mike did. She said maybe if they'd all turned their backs on me instead of trying to make the best of the situation, my brother wouldn't have felt so betrayed by the whole family. My wife heard what my mom said, and it hit her hard. She started questioning everything about our relationship. The other night, she asked me if I ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't gotten together. If I regret choosing her over my brother. I didn't know what to say. How do you tell your wife that you regret your actions, but not the life you've built together? My younger siblings are all grown up now, in their early 20s. I love them, but there's this gap between us that I can't seem to bridge. They were just kids when everything happened, too young to understand. Now they're adults, and they know the whole story. They're polite to me at family gatherings, but they're closer to Mike and my other brother. They spend holidays with them sometimes, and I can see pictures of them all together on social media, looking like a real family. I started seeing a therapist last month. In my family, therapy was always seen as something for weak people who couldn't handle their problems. But after 15 years of carrying this weight, I finally admitted I needed help. My therapist asked me to talk about my relationship with my wife, how it started, and for the first time, I had to say out loud exactly what we did. It's one thing to know you did something wrong. It's another thing entirely to sit in a room with a stranger and describe how you betrayed your own brother, how you saw him hurting and chose to continue anyway, how you let your parents help cover it up and then blamed everyone else when it all fell apart. My wife refuses to go to therapy. She says the past is the past, and digging it up won't help anyone. She gets angry whenever I talk about wanting to make amends with my brothers. She says I'm going to ruin our family by bringing up old wounds. But these wounds never really healed. They've just been festering under the surface all these years. The hardest part is trying to figure out how to talk to our kids about all this. Our oldest is 13 now, old enough to start asking questions about family dynamics. He wants to know why he never sees his uncles, why some family members treat us differently. My wife thinks we should just tell him that sometimes families grow apart, but I feel like he deserves to know the truth, or at least some version of it. How do you tell your child that their parents' relationship started with betrayal? That their existence is the result of choices that tore a family apart? I love my kids more than anything in this world. They're the best things that ever happened to me. But their very existence is tangled up with the worst thing I've ever done. My therapist suggested writing letters to my brothers, not to send them, just to get my feelings out. I've tried several times, but the words never come out right. How do you apologize for something when you can't fully regret it? Every time I start to write "I'm sorry," my mind goes to my kids, and I get stuck. Because if I could go back in time, knowing what I know now, I'm not sure I would change anything. The thought of my children not existing is unbearable. Last week, I found out through family gossip that my brother's oldest daughter is getting married next spring. She's 22, just a few years younger than I was when everything happened. My mom is going to the wedding, along with my younger siblings. My dad got an invitation too, though no one knows if he'll go. I didn't expect to be invited, but knowing about the wedding makes everything feel more real somehow. Life has gone on for my brother. He's about to be the father of the bride, and I'm a stranger to him. Mike recently sent a group text to the family about a reunion he's planning for next summer. Everyone was included except me, my wife, and our kids. My dad tried to argue for including us, but Mike shut it down immediately. He said he wouldn't do that to our brother, that some things can't be fixed just because time has passed. I find myself looking at old family photos more and more lately. There's one from the summer before everything fell apart. All of us at a family barbecue. My brother with his arm around his girlfriend, me standing next to them, all of us smiling. We looked so happy, so normal. Sometimes I stare at my face in that photo, wanting to reach through time and shake some sense into myself. But then I remember that changing anything about that time would mean my kids wouldn't exist, and I feel guilty all over again. My wife caught me looking at these old photos the other day. She got upset and said I was living in the past. She reminded me that we have a good life, that we've been happy together all these years. She's right about that. We do have a good life. We've built something real and solid together. But lately, I can't shake the feeling that our foundation is cracked, and the cracks are finally starting to show. I never thought I'd be in this position at 38. Successful career, beautiful family, nice house, and still feel like I'm drowning in regret. My therapist says I need to find a way to acknowledge both truths, that I did something terribly wrong, and that something wonderful came from it. She says I need to find a way to make peace with this contradiction. But right now, peace feels very far away. My therapist says I need to be honest with myself before I can be honest with anyone else. She asked me to write down exactly what happened, without making excuses or trying to justify anything. It took me 3 sessions to get through it all, but finally saying everything out loud made me realize how many lies I've been telling myself all these years. I keep saying I didn't know what I was doing back then, but that's not true. I knew exactly what I was doing. Every time I spent time with my brother's girlfriend, every text message, every secret meetup, these were all choices I made. I wasn't young enough to claim ignorance. At 25, I was old enough to know better. My wife and I had a long talk last night about everything. She admitted she's scared that if I fix things with my brother, it will somehow break our family apart. She thinks that if I truly make amends with him, I'll have to admit that what we did was wrong, and that admitting it was wrong means our whole relationship is wrong. I tried to explain that's not how I feel, but I'm not sure she believes me. The truth is, I do think what we did was wrong. We hurt people who loved us and trusted us. We broke something that can never really be fixed. But I also love my wife and our children with everything I have. Both of these things are true, and I'm finally learning that I have to hold both of these truths at the same time. My oldest son came home from school upset last week. Someone at school, a cousin on my brother's side of the family, had told him some things about how his parents got together. He asked me if it was true that I stole his mom from his uncle. I sat him down and told him a version of the truth that I thought he could handle at his age. I explained that his mom and I got together when we shouldn't have, that we hurt people we cared about, but that none of that changes how much we love him and his sister. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he asked if that's why he's never met his uncle. When I said yes, he got this look on his face that I've never seen before, like he was seeing me differently for the first time. He went to his room and didn't come down for dinner. My wife was furious that I told him anything, but he's old enough to start hearing the truth from us instead of from others. My daughter is still too young to understand any of this. She's 7 and just wants to know why she has cousins she's never met. Every time she asks, it feels like a knife in my chest. My wife tells her it's because they live far away, but that excuse won't work forever. I've started writing a real letter to my brother, not just the practice ones my therapist suggested, but one I actually plan to send. I've rewritten it dozens of times. It's hard to find the right words to apologize for something this big. How do you ask forgiveness for stealing someone's future? For taking the life they thought they would have and destroying it? My mom told me that my brother's wife knows all about what happened. Apparently, he told her everything before they got serious. Mom says she's a kind person who helped my brother work through a lot of his anger and pain. Sometimes I wonder what their conversations about me are like. Do they talk about what I did? Does she hate me as much as she probably should? Last month, my dad finally worked up the courage to go visit my brother. He didn't tell anyone he was going. He just got in his car and drove 6 hours to the town where my brother lives. He came back looking both happier and sadder than I've seen him in years. He said my brother was polite but distant. He got to meet his grandchildren briefly, but it was clear that he was still very much an outsider in their lives. My dad told me something that's been haunting me ever since. He said my brother has this great life now, successful career, loving wife, beautiful kids, but he still carries the pain of what happened. Dad could see it in the way my brother tensed up whenever our family was mentioned, in the way he kept his distance even while being polite. The betrayal changed him fundamentally, Dad said. It made him more cautious, more guarded, even with his own family. Mike sent me an email last week, the first direct contact we've had in years. He said he's been watching me try to make amends through therapy and through my attempts to take responsibility for what I did. He said he appreciates that I'm finally trying to own up to everything, but he wanted me to understand that some damage can't be undone. He said our brother has forgiven us enough to have a relationship with our parents, but that doesn't mean he's ready or willing to have a relationship with me. I understand that. I do. But it still hurts to know that this might be as good as it gets, that my children might grow up never knowing their uncle or their cousins, that family gatherings will always be split, that there will always be this divide in our family that I created. My wife and I started marriage counseling last week. It was her idea, which surprised me. She said she's tired of feeling like she's competing with my guilt. The counselor asked us both to talk about what we want for our future. My wife said she wants to stop feeling like our love is tainted, like we have to apologize for being happy together. I said I want to find a way to make peace with our past without destroying our present. The counselor pointed out something interesting, that maybe part of why we've avoided dealing with this for so long is because we're both afraid that examining our relationship's beginnings too closely will somehow make it less real or less valuable. But she said the opposite might be true, that really facing what we did wrong might actually make our relationship stronger, because we'd finally be dealing with everything honestly. I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness lately, not just about whether my brother will ever forgive me, but about whether I can forgive myself. My therapist says self-forgiveness isn't about excusing what you did wrong. It's about accepting that you did something wrong, taking responsibility for it, and then finding a way to move forward as a better person. Yesterday, I started a journal for each of my kids. I'm writing down everything I want them to know about our family story when they're old enough to understand it all. I want them to know that their parents made serious mistakes, that we hurt people we loved, but that they themselves are not mistakes. I want them to understand that love can be complicated, that you can deeply regret your actions while still being grateful for their results. My mom told me recently that my brother has started asking about my kids. Not me or my wife, just the kids. She thinks maybe someday, years from now, he might be open to them having some kind of relationship with their cousins. It's a small thing, but it gives me hope, not for myself, but for my children. Maybe they won't have to carry the weight of my mistakes forever. I know now that there are some things I can never make right. I can't undo what I did to my brother. I can't give him back what I took from him, but maybe I can still do better going forward. Maybe I can teach my children about loyalty and honesty in a way that only someone who betrayed both can understand. Maybe I can help them learn from my mistakes so they never have to learn these lessons the hard way. That's really all I can do now. Try to be better, try to teach my children to be better, and hope that someday, in some small way, that might be enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.